Oh boy. Heart of Glory. See, this is one of those episodes that's really, really Klingon culture centric. And it was an early TNG one. So it has certain, I guess you could say, questionably canon things in it too, which makes it extra interesting. Now, here's another one that's interesting. Um, Playing with the fact that LaForge is a cyborg and actually using that for the benefit of the crew. Oh yeah, that was a weird plot device that they don't use often in TNG. Probably should use it more often, but they don't. Anyway, though, so I have the Talarian freighter Batris, and the crew of the Enterprise goes over there to figure out what happened to it. There's no Federation vessels in the area, and Fr- Ferengi, Romulans, whatever. See, this is actually a starting point that would actually be extremely easy for a TTRPG. Like, oh, your crew has been hailed by Starfleet Command and told to go do the thing. So go do the thing. Shiblamo. Now, obviously, from a big picture standpoint, the Batris is not a Klingon vessel, and the three renegade Klingons who seized control of it were, let's just say, not acting in the best interest of the Klingon Empire. And that's something that it becomes a very interesting in TNG is that the nature of the alliance between the Federation and the Klingons, it's not entirely clear how close that alliance was actually supposed to be. And some people think that the original plan with Worf was to actually just say that Klingons joined Starfleet. Or at the very least, the Federation and the Klingon Empire were no longer separate political entities, even if they hadn't like fully merged. And this has certain aspects of that to it. Of course, the whole thing is like, why steal a Talarian ship? Also, why is the Talarian ship shot full of holes? Hmm. Well, for one, why steal a Talarian ship? Because real warships are harder to steal. And now, as for why the batch was self-destructed, yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that one. Anyway, though, the Klingons on the Ta'akug tried to um, steal the Batris, but the Ta'akug actually ended up being destroyed, and the Klingons who uh, were leading the attack managed to, who survived anyways, temporarily, beamed over to the Batris so that they could kill the crew of the Batris the hard way. Thing is, they'd already shot the Batris full of holes. And I'm guessing the captain of the Batris set the ship to self-destruct after he realized there was a boarding party of Klingons who he wasn't certain his crew could actually stop. At any rate, this is an interesting thing because of the fact that we don't see a whole lot of Talarian ships. We really don't, because again, minor race, we only actually see in person one episode. But using minor races like that as part of of a TTRPG is a great idea. I mean, because like United Federation of Planets, if the Talarians were to uh, send a subspace radio message to Starfleet Command saying they needed help with an attack by pirates, Starfleet would actually be willing to help them. So, that sort of logic in a TTRPG is very workable. And yeah, so the the crew of the Enterprise has to start out off by going on board the Talarian ship, finding the Klingon idiots who haven't been killed yet, and then getting off before the Talarian ship explodes. And then they have to figure out how to get the Klingons to tell them the truth about what happened. You see, both ships are now exploded. Um, and they don't have any hard evidence on why other than what the Klingons are going to tell them. And the Klingons aren't exactly being, shall we say, upfront and honest about it. And the fact that one of them is dying, well, why is he dying? Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question, huh? Now, here's another interesting thing. Worf actually specifically says that, as far as he knows, he's the only Klingon in Starfleet. Now, this is something that's interesting because the fact that we know he's not the only Klingon who works for the Federation. There are several of those that we see in TNG. However, being a Starfleet officer is a bit different. Now, here's the thing. What actually killed this guy? Mm, do, 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 do. It just says that he was injured in the conflict. Doesn't really explain how. Although it is entirely possible that he got shot by one of the Talarians. So, because again, like the reason the crew of the Batris was dead was because these guys killed them. So, as it writing this as a TTRPG, it's actually a pretty simple like setup and execution. Like this is a episode that you could pretty directly adapt to make a TTRPG module. You have several plot elements that are pretty simple and easy. Like, I mentioned earlier is the mission granted dialogue where the crew of the Enterprise gets a message from Starfleet Command that something has come up that needs their attention, and they go and take care of it. And now, this is the part that gets interesting, is because of the fact that the Klingons were, in fact, actually paying attention to what the guys who attacked the Batris were doing. Granted, they were unable to stop them from attacking the Batris. However, they were looking for them. And if the Enterprise hadn't gotten there, the Klingons would have blown the Batris out of space to kill the pirate Klingons, because that's basically what they are. Is that they're Klingons who dream of glory and war and resort to piracy in order to uh, get the glory they crave. And do any of them live? I don't actually. Yeah, the two remaining Klingons decide that they would rather die than be sent to prison. And yeah. What is interesting about this episode is that does a lot of lore building for the status of the Klingon Empire in TNG. A lot of it, like the Klingon death ritual stuff, is very new to TNG. This is something that they did not even look in the general direction of in TOS or the movies, because none of the movies actually went that deep into Klingons. Like, movies had Klingons in them, but they didn't like deep dive into Klingon culture like this does. In fact, TOS episodes actually paid more attention to Klingon culture than the movies did overall. Anyway, though, um, the various plot elements here do, however, show you that the Klingon lunatic honestly sounds like a good way of putting it, have very conflicted feelings. See, because they crave the glory of battle, but they are rebels without a cause, or I guess you'd say warriors without a war, and that's their core problem. They don't have glory because they don't have battle, and that's kind of where the name of the episode comes from. Is that they don't? There is no glory for them, not the kind of glory they crave. And, well, that's why they all end up dead, is because the only kind of glory that they can find is the glory of an honorable death, which, quite frankly, given the circumstances, I would not consider their deaths honorable. But whatever. Klingon honor is one of those things that is extremely fickle and bizarre, and attempting to use Klingon honor in a TTRPG will come up anytime Klingons are in the TTRPG, because of the fact that TNG made it such a huge deal with Klingons that everything following TNG is stuck with it. Now, if you're playing TOS, you can skip with the Klingon honor thing because that wasn't a plot element in TOS. It just wasn't. Now, Klingons had something akin to a concept of honor in TOS. That is true. It was much more realistic and reasonable by real world standards, in terms of, like, this person is a liar and therefore we shouldn't trust him, and that kind of logic level, not the vague weirdness of, like, I must have an honorable death. No, they didn't do that in TOS. They didn't. Yeah, Klingon culture got so drastically changed in TNG that it became almost unrecognizable. Anyways, though, now that is something that would be fun to look into, is because of the fact that, as multiple sources have pointed out, the drastic cultural changes in Klingon history had long lasting, far reaching effects on Klingon society. And it's not as simple as, oh, we decided we want to be warriors today. No, 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 no. It went beyond that. And it's not actually something that's as simple as wanting to be warriors or not wanting to be warriors. Because in TNG, you see a lot of Klingons who aren't warriors, which is what I was saying earlier about how you have um, Worf is technically the only Klingon in Starfleet, but he's not the only Klingon who works for the Federation. And none of those are actually warriors. Some of them are cranky people who get into physical altercations on a regular basis, but they're not technically warriors. Anyway, though, oh yeah, this is another one. Is that it's just one of those things where it's like, oh hey, here's a random outpost that is off in the boondocks. We need you to investigate, see if it's been exploded or something. Now, the crew of the Enterprise does not actually go there. That is actually used in this episode as something Chorus claimed as part of his attempt at lying to hide his crimes. And that's another part of this episode that gets interesting when you can think about it, is that Chorus, as part of all of his weird Klingon logic stuff, is actually lying through his teeth about what he did in order to hide uh, the fact that he literally just murdered a Talarian crew for no reason. He's like, he craves battle. However, he has no reason to fight the Talarians. And ultimately, that's where that whole conflict is that he wants to be an honorable warrior, but he doesn't have a war to fight. So he gets into fights with people who he doesn't actually have a good reason to fight. And that sort of a moral juxtaposition actually is an interesting plot element here because of the fact that Chorus wants to be a good, uh, honorable warrior, even after he has murdered the crew of the Batris. He still wants to be an honorable warrior, even though his crimes have resulted in a situation where the only thing he's getting, if he goes back to the Klingon Empire, is either locked up in prison, much like that whole Rura Penthe thing where they stuck Kirk in the movies, or executed. Because, again, he murdered an, an entire freighter crew of Talarians. And it's not entirely clear how he stole a Klingon ship in the first place. Might have murdered several Klingons too. Don't really know that part. Anyway, though, when writing this in TTRPG, that's something to keep in mind. Is that this is a villain who has a very, very fickle moral code and is emotionally conflicted because he's telling himself that he's just doing, honorable warrior things. However, no one around him sees his actions as honorable, especially not the Talarians. But even the other Klingons think he's scum because of the fact that he's picking fights. At any rate, I'll leave you with that. Like I said, it's like it's a very simple premise for a episode, And something that as a TTRPG would actually be a relatively quick uh, thing, and you could possibly do this as part of a I mean, you could set up a series of short episodes and have players do those in the game. And this, again, this would actually be reasonably suited for a short episode. Although you could use it to lead into something else that's more meaty, I guess you could say. At any rate, I will see you guys next time.